Hi, my name is Jared Wright, and I serve with Adventist Frontier Missions in Northeast Thailand. And today, I have an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about grit. This is just part of an ongoing series, Grace and Grit. But for the past few weeks, I've been actually kind of focusing on this idea and kind of developing my own definition of what is grit. And as I've been reading different authors and different ideas about how to define grit for me, what does it mean, what does it look like, I've kind of developed this own definition in my mind for what is grit. And I would say in the simplest terms, if I could describe grit, it would be to have an indomitable spirit, literally a spirit that cannot be dominated by circumstances or someone else, right? And as I was reflecting on this definition, I got to thinking about one figure in particular, and that is Harriet Tubman. So a few weeks ago, I started reading a book about Harriet Tubman, about her life and the time she lived in. And as I was preparing this week to prepare this devotional talk, it was just kind of amazing to me how appropriate some of the things I was reading about her life, about Harriet Tubman's life, just how appropriate it was in the times that we're living in right now, especially as from our side of the world, we're reading about what's going on in the United States right now. With the killing of our brother, George Floyd, and the protests. And so today I'd just like to share a little bit, some things about Harriet Tubman's life and what I learned from her life and her experiences about grit. Many people don't know when she was actually a young girl, there was an incident that happened that actually really had a profound impact on her life and led her to be who she was, right? And I just want to read this from the book. If you're interested, you can find the book on Amazon. The book is entitled She Came to Slay: The Life and Times of Harriet Tubman by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. Great book, highly recommend it. What was interesting to me about Harriet Tubman is when she was a girl, she had actually 3 strikes against her. She was black, she was enslaved, and she was a woman. But what's amazing is, to her people, and this is the way the author described it, is her people would call her Moses. She just became this amazing figure that led people, right, to freedom. But when she was a girl, somewhere between the years 1834 and 1836, Araminta and another slave from the same farm were sent on an errand into town for what was supposed to be a quick, uneventful trip to a general store to pick up some items needed for the house. But when Araminta, Harriet Tubman, crossed paths with a young man from a nearby farm, her life was profoundly changed. An overseer was in hot pursuit of the man who had the audacity to abandon his post as if he were free, and his pursuer had every intention of whipping him. The tension was palpable within the walls of the store. The overseer ordered Araminta to help tie down the enslaved man, but she refused, allowing the slave the opportunity to slip out of the store. In a fury, the overseer picked up a 2-pound weight off the counter and hurled it in the direction of the runaway. Araminta's head received the full force of the iron weight instead. The impact broke her skull, and as she later recalled, she said, "It cut a piece of that shawl clean off and it drove it into my head. They carried me to the house all bleeding and fainting, and I had no bed, no place to lie down at all. And they laid me on the seat of a loom, and I stayed there all that day and the next." Just like the time she contracted measles and was forced nonetheless to continue working, Araminta returned to her toil in the fields without ever being treated for the life-threatening injury. Even as she bled from the festering wound and grew weaker by the day, she said, "I went to work again, and there I worked with the blood and the sweat rolling down my face till I couldn't see." Sometime after that, she actually recovered from this injury. And the author goes on to say her recovery from a fractured skull appeared to be a miracle. The physical transformation was accompanied by a metaphysical one as well. Perhaps her near-death experience pushed her into the arms of Christianity, or maybe the constant violence and trauma of slavery made Araminta depend upon the hope and optimism that was tied to her faith. Now a devout Christian, she believed that her sleeping spells served as a portal to her Almighty. Araminta would wake from her spells with memories of visions and images that predicted the future. These dreams would serve as signposts, directing Araminta's actions literally for the rest of her life. These directives became critical when she began to work on the Underground Railroad. Her dreams would tell her which roads to follow in the dark hours of the night and alert her to people and places to avoid. Araminta's informed intuition could help her stay 2 steps ahead of an owner or a slave catcher that meant to do her harm, and her visions helped her better protect her family and loved ones. And so one thing that was just amazing to me as a girl when she suffered this injury, in fact, she actually, I think for most of her life, actually suffered from narcolepsy, where she would just have these seizures and just fall asleep, right? Which was terrible, a terrible condition to have when she was supposed to be leading people at night on the Underground Railroad, leading them from one way station to the next, and they'd be going through marshes and they'd be going through forests, trying to stay away from these slave catchers. And at any moment, she might just drop down and fall asleep, right? So there was just this terrible liability and fear that always followed. But she would have these visions where God would give her directions and lead her and guide her. And when she would come out of this sleep the seizures or the sleep that she would fall into, she would say, okay, we need to go this way or we need to go that way. So it's just amazing to see how, even though she suffered this terrible injury, how God, used that, and how she, in her writings, right, and different, at that time, biographers who wrote about her life said, this terrible accident that happened to her life ultimately led to God being able to guide her and lead her, right, and lead others to safety. Another story that was interesting as I was reading about her life, and really just kind of embodies this idea of grit, having a spirit that cannot be dominated. She had to make some tough decisions and show some just amazing grit as she was leading people on the Underground Railroad. Says she couldn't remember how many times she had risked her own life to save others. To date, every fugitive she agreed to help escape, she had conducted to safety. Her record was sterling. Much was required for the journey. Fearlessness, first and foremost. You had to learn to disregard the night creatures, endure the mosquitoes, the humidity, and move forward even when a hound's violent bark pierced the night. Driving snow, pounding rain could not intimidate, neither could bruised and bloody feet, nor pitch-black forests. Her resolve and strength were tested each time she traveled back to Maryland on a rescue mission, but she believed in herself and in her God. It wasn't just Harriet who would need grit. Her fugitive followers would need it too. We can only imagine the orientation Harriet gave the runaways, how she prepared them for what to expect. Her methods had to have been effective because on her previous trips, nothing had gone wrong, but this time, one runaway lost his nerve. A group of fugitives followed Harriet into the cold swamps of Maryland's eastern shore, where they hid during the daylight hours. At night, they traveled north, all the while trying to ignore their empty stomachs and deteriorating faith. The journey had taken its toll on the group, but one man in particular was broken by the terror and fatigue. He announced that he would return to the farm and take his chances on the punishment that he would likely face. He refused to listen to the other fugitives in his party who begged him to continue on with them. The frigid nights, the wet clothes, the fear, and the thirst wore the man down. He refused to move another step, provoking a standoff between himself and the group's leader. Harriet could not let one man endanger their lives and the lives of the entire group. He was the weak link in the chain of co-conspirators who now knew the route that Harriet used to rescue her fugitives. She was certain that severe punishment could easily pry this information from his lips. Harriet said, "If he was weak enough to give out, he'd be weak enough to betray us all, and all who had helped us. And do you think I'd let so many die for just one coward man?" She had to protect herself and the others, so she did what needed to be done. Harriet approached the man, aimed a revolver at his head, and told him that he had a decision to make. He could keep moving or he could die. Harriet would kill this man before letting him jeopardize her operation. Not only did she have the well-being of the other fugitives on her mind, but she also thought about the other family members she had yet to rescue. If she had to, she would kill him and bury his body in the woods. The terrified fugitive knew that Harriet meant what she said. Her eyes warned him not to test her. He made the wise decision to continue on with the other fugitives and to follow his conductor, as others had before him and as others would do after. It was interesting later in life when the biography, one of the first biographies was written about her life, not too long after the Civil War. Frederick Douglass wrote a portion, contributed to her biography of Harriet Tubman's life. And I want to share his words too, what he said about her life. It says, Frederick Douglass wrote, "The difference between us is very marked. Most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I have received much encouragement at every step of the way. You, Harriet, on the other hand, have labored in a private way. I have wrought in the day, you in the night. I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes of being approved by the multitude, while the most that you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scarred, and footsore bondmen and women whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt God bless you has been your only reward. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witnesses of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism. Excepting John Brown of sacred memory, I know of no one else who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than you have." Let's pray. Father in heaven, I just want to ask that during these times with everything that's going on around us in the world, as we're just reflecting and just some of the terrible things that are going on in the U.S. and around the world, but especially at home in the U.S. right now. God, I just pray that you would give us all a spirit of grit, a spirit that cannot be dominated by our circumstances, by our situation in life. Lord, I just want to pray especially too for all of our brothers and sisters, black, white, but especially our brothers and sisters, George Floyd, his family, Ahmaud Arbery, and others. Lord, and the pain that we're going through, the divide. Lord, I just pray for a spirit of togetherness, and that somehow we would come out of all of this stronger. Through this dark night, we would come out more bonded in a spirit of brotherhood and a spirit of love. And that you just give us the heart of Jesus. Pray all this in your name. Amen.
Somewhere on this earth, in the heart of a foreign land, a family with a passion is living their mission plan, bringing God's truth to a hungry, thirsty tribe, knowing well their lives are always on the line. Missionaries need missionaries too. They need the prayers of loved ones. They need love from me and you. And when they just like Christ make the ultimate sacrifice, someday in heaven they'll thank you, 'cause you're a missionary too. Someday in heaven they'll thank you for the things your prayers have brought them through, and your mission is accomplished. Oh, thank you. You're a missionary too. You're a missionary too. You're a missionary too.